The first thing I noticed was the silence. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a library or the expectant hush before a concert. No, this silence had weight, pressing against my eardrums like a physical force. It was as if the very stones of Blackmoor Castle were holding their breath, waiting. I stood in the dim light of the antechamber, my fingers tracing the rough-hewn stone of the walls. The air was thick with the musty scent of age and neglect, a cocktail of dust, mold, and secrets long buried. My name is William Thorne, and as a history student working a summer job at the castle, I thought I was prepared for anything these ancient halls might reveal. I was wrong. "Mr. Thorne?" The voice of Dr. Eliza Blackwood, the castle's curator, echoed from the corridor. "Have you started the inventory in the north wing yet?" I cleared my throat, trying to shake off the eerie feeling that had settled over me. "Just about to, Dr. Blackwood." I was familiarizing myself with the layout. Her footsteps approached, each click of her heels on the stone floor like a metronome counting down to something. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the precipice of something monumental. Dr. Blackwood appeared in the doorway, her silver hair gleaming in the weak light that filtered through the grimy windows. Her eyes, sharp as ever, scanned the room before settling on me. "Remember, William, some of these artifacts haven't been properly cataloged in over a century. Be thorough, but more importantly, be careful. These old things have a way of surprising you." I nodded, trying to ignore the chill that ran down my spine at her words. "Of course, Dr. Blackwood. I'll treat everything with the utmost care." She held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary, as if trying to convey something without words. Then, with a curt nod, she turned and disappeared back into the shadowy corridor. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy oak door that led to the north wing. The hinges groaned in protest, the sound echoing through the empty chambers beyond. As I stepped inside, the silence seemed to deepen, if that were possible. The north wing was a labyrinth of interconnected rooms, each filled with dusty furniture draped in yellowing sheets and display cases, containing artifacts from the castle's long and often bloody history. I moved from room to room, meticulously noting each item in my digital tablet, occasionally pausing to examine a particularly interesting piece. It was in the third room that I saw it. At first, I almost missed it, my eyes skipping over the large, ornate frame covered by a tattered velvet cloth. But something made me pause, a niggling sensation at the back of my mind that refused to be ignored. Slowly, I approached the covered frame. My hand trembled slightly as I reached out to grasp the edge of the cloth. For a moment, I hesitated, Dr. Blackwood's warning echoing in my mind. But curiosity won out, as it always did with me. I pulled the cloth away in one swift motion, sending up a cloud of dust that made me cough and sputter. As the air cleared, I found myself staring not at a painting, as I had expected, but at a mirror. The mirror was unlike anything I had ever seen. The frame was made of intricately carved ebony, depicting writhing figures locked in what could have been ecstasy or agony. The glass itself seemed to shimmer, as if it wasn't quite solid, more like the surface of a pond disturbed by a gentle breeze. I leaned closer, my reflection coming into focus. But something was off. The face that stared back at me was my own, and yet not. The eyes were a shade too dark, the smile a touch too wide. I blinked, and for a split second, I could have sworn I saw something move in the depths of the mirror, just beyond my reflection. My heart pounding, I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet. I looked down at my tablet, searching for any record of this mirror in the castle's database. There was nothing. With shaking hands, I began to input a new entry. Item: mirror location, north wing, room 3. Description: large mirror in ebony frame. Ornate carvings on frame depict human figures. Glass appears to have unusual properties. Notes: no previous record found. Exercise caution when approaching. As I typed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced up at the mirror again, half expecting to see someone else's face staring back at me. but it was just my reflection, normal and unremarkable. I shook my head, trying to clear it. "Get a grip, William," I muttered to myself. "It's just an old mirror in a spooky castle. Nothing to lose your head over." But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't true. There was something about this mirror, something that set it apart from the countless other artifacts I had cataloged over the past weeks. It was as if it was calling to me, whispering secrets just beyond the edge of hearing. I forced myself to turn away, to continue my inventory of the room. But my eyes kept being drawn back to the mirror, like a moth to a flame. And each time I looked, I could swear that my reflection was just a little different, a little less me. As the day wore on, I found myself making excuses to return to that room, to stand before the mirror. I told myself it was professional curiosity, that I was just being thorough in my documentation. But deep down, I knew it was something more. It wasn't until the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, that I finally prepared to leave. As I gathered my things, I cast one last glance at the mirror, and that's when I saw it. My reflection winked at me. I froze, my blood turning to ice in my veins. Slowly, ever so slowly, I raised my hand to my face. My reflection did the same. I blinked. It didn't. Instead, it smiled, a wide, unnatural grin that split its face almost from ear to ear. And then, as I watched in horror, it began to change. The features shifted, melted, reformed into something else. Something that wore my face like an ill-fitting mask. I ran. I ran from that room as if all the demons of hell were at my heels. I didn't stop until I reached the antechamber, my lungs burning, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. As I leaned against the wall, gasping for breath, Dr. Blackwood's voice drifted from the corridor. "Mr. Thorne, is everything all right?" I opened my mouth to tell her what I had seen, to beg her to destroy that cursed mirror. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I heard myself say, "Everything's fine, Dr. Blackwood, just finished up for the day." She appeared in the doorway, her brow furrowed with concern. "You look pale, William. Are you sure you're all right?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just tired. It's been a long day." As I left the castle that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had set something in motion, something dark and dangerous. And as I glanced back at the looming structure, I could have sworn I saw a face in one of the windows of the north wing. My face, but not my face, watching me with eyes that gleamed with malevolent hunger. I knew then that my work at Blackmoor Castle was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that twisted version of my face in the mirror, its lips curled in a mockery of a smile. The rational part of my mind insisted it had been a trick of the light, a hallucination brought on by too many hours in the musty confines of the castle. But deep down, I knew better. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, I found myself driving back to Blackmoor Castle. The morning mist clung to the ancient stones, giving the structure an otherworldly appearance. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, debating whether to go in or flee and never look back. "You're being ridiculous," I muttered to myself, finally mustering the courage to exit the vehicle. "It's just an old mirror, nothing more." The castle was quiet as I made my way to the north wing, my footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. I paused at the entrance to room 3, my heart pounding in my chest. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The mirror stood exactly where I had left it, innocuous in the pale morning light. I approached it cautiously, half expecting my distorted reflection to leer back at me. But all I saw was my own face, tired and drawn from a sleepless night. I let out a shaky laugh, relief washing over me. "See? Nothing to worry about. You're letting your imagination run wild, William." "Talking to yourself, Mr. Thorne?" Dr. Blackwood's voice made me jump. I spun around to find her standing in the doorway, an amused expression on her face. "Dr. Blackwood, I was just..." I stammered, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. She waved a hand dismissively. No need to explain. We all develop our little quirks when working in places like this. Her eyes drifted to the mirror behind me. I see you've uncovered our mysterious mirror. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes, I found it yesterday. There's no record of it in the database. Do you know anything about its history? Dr. Blackwood's expression turned thoughtful.
That mirror has been a subject of speculation for generations. It's said to have belonged to Lady Isabella Blackmoor in the 17th century. Legend has it that she used it for scrying, attempting to see the future or communicate with spirits. A chill ran down my spine at her words. And did she succeed? The curator's lips curved in an enigmatic smile. That depends on who you ask. Some say she gained great power and knowledge. Others claim it drove her mad.
She died under mysterious circumstances. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. What kind of circumstances? She was found dead in front of the mirror, her eyes wide open and a look of terror on her face. Some of the servants claimed they heard her screaming about the things in the mirror in the days leading up to her death. Dr. Blackwood paused, her gaze intense. But those are just old stories, Mr. Thorne. I'm sure a man of science like yourself doesn't put much stock in such tales. Of course not, I said quickly, perhaps too quickly. It's an interesting piece of local folklore, though. I'll make sure to include it in my notes. Dr. Blackwood nodded, seemingly satisfied. Very good. I'll leave you to your work then. Oh, and William? She turned back just as she was about to leave. Do be careful. Old objects like these can be unpredictable. As her footsteps faded away, I turned back to the mirror, a sense of unease settling over me. The glass seemed to ripple just for a moment, like the surface of a pond disturbed by a thrown stone. I blinked, and it was solid again. I spent the rest of the morning cataloging other items in the room, but my attention kept drifting back to the mirror. More than once I caught movement in my peripheral vision, only to find nothing when I turned to look directly at it. As the day wore on, a plan began to form in my mind. I needed to know more about this mirror, about Lady Isabella, about the strange occurrences surrounding it. The castle's library was extensive. Surely there would be records, diaries, something that could shed light on the mystery. I waited until late afternoon when most of the staff had left for the day. Slipping into the library, I began my search. Hours passed as I pored over old books and scrolls, my eyes straining in the dim light. Just as I was about to give up, a small, leather-bound journal caught my eye. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed with age. As I opened it, a slip of paper fell out. I picked it up, my heart racing as I read the faded handwriting. The mirror shows not what is, but what could be. Beware its whispers, for they lead to madness and ruin. I.B. Isabella Blackmoor. This had to be her journal. My hands shook as I began to read, the entries growing more disturbing with each page. May 15th, 1652. The mirror spoke to me again today. It shows me wondrous things, terrible things. Am I going mad, or am I seeing truths others cannot? June 3rd, 1652. I see myself in the mirror, but it is not me. She is stronger, more powerful. She tells me I can become her if I only... No, I must not listen. I must be strong. July 20th, 1652. The other me is angry. She pounds on the glass, screaming to be let out. I fear what will happen if she escapes. God help me, what have I done? The final entry was dated August 1st, 1652, the day before Isabella's death. The writing was erratic, barely legible. It's too late. She's coming. I can't stop her. The mirror, the cursed mirror. It's a door, and I've opened it. Forgive me. Destroy the mirror before... The entry ended abruptly, a long ink streak marring the page as if the pen had been violently jerked away. I sat back, my mind reeling from what I had read. It couldn't be true. It had to be the ramblings of a disturbed woman, nothing more. And yet, a noise from outside the library made me jump. Quickly, I shoved the journal into my bag, my heart pounding. I needed time to process what I had learned, to figure out what to do next. As I hurried out of the castle, the setting sun cast long shadows across the grounds. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was following me. I glanced back at the north wing, and for a moment I could have sworn I saw a figure standing at the window of room 3. A figure that looked just like me, but with eyes that gleamed with an otherworldly light. I drove home in a daze, my mind churning with questions. What had Isabella Blackmoor really seen in that mirror? What had she unleashed? And most terrifyingly, what did it want with me? As I pulled into my driveway, a chill ran down my spine, for there in my bedroom window I saw a face watching me. My face, but not my face, and it was smiling. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning as my mind raced with the implications of what I'd discovered. The journal entries, the legend of Lady Isabella, and most disturbingly, the face I'd seen in my own window. It all pointed to something beyond my understanding, something that defied rational explanation. As dawn broke, I made a decision. I couldn't simply walk away from this, not when I might be the only one who could unravel the mystery of the mirror. But I also couldn't face this alone. I needed help, someone who could offer a fresh perspective and, hopefully, keep me grounded in reality. I called my best friend, Dr. Evelyn Chen, a professor of parapsychology at the local university. If anyone could make sense of this, it would be her. To my relief, she agreed to meet me at the castle that afternoon. The day crawled by as I waited for Evelyn's arrival. I tried to focus on my work, cataloging other artifacts in the north wing, but my eyes kept being drawn back to the mirror. More than once, I caught glimpses of movement in its depths, fleeting images that vanished the moment I tried to focus on them. Finally, at 3 p.m., I heard the crunch of tires on gravel outside. I hurried to meet Evelyn, my heart lightening at the sight of her familiar face. "Will," she said, pulling me into a quick hug. "You look like hell. What's going on?" I led her to a quiet corner of the castle grounds away from prying ears and poured out the whole story. To her credit, Evelyn listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious with each passing minute. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "Will," she said finally, "I've heard stories like this before, but I've never encountered anything so immediate. Are you absolutely sure about what you saw?" I nodded emphatically. "I know how it sounds, Ev. If I hadn't experienced it myself, I wouldn't believe it either. But I'm telling you, there's something in that mirror. Something that wants out." Evelyn's brow furrowed in thought. "All right, let's approach this methodically. We need to examine the mirror, run some tests. If there really is some kind of paranormal activity, we should be able to detect it." Relief flooded through me. Having Evelyn here, approaching the problem with scientific rigor, made me feel less like I was losing my mind. We made our way to room 3, Evelyn carrying a bag of equipment, EMF detectors, infrared cameras, and other tools of her trade. As we entered, I saw her eyes widen at the sight of the mirror. "Remarkable craftsmanship," she murmured, approaching it cautiously. "And you say there's no record of its provenance?" I shook my head. "Nothing official. Just the stories about Lady Isabella." Evelyn began setting up her equipment, placing sensors around the mirror and adjusting her cameras. I watched nervously, half expecting my distorted reflection to appear at any moment. "All right," Evelyn said after a few minutes. "Everything's set up. Now we wait and see if we can capture any anomalous activity." We sat in silence for what felt like hours, the only sound the occasional beep from Evelyn's equipment. Just as I was beginning to think nothing would happen, one of the EMF detectors let out a shrill whine. Evelyn leapt to her feet, adjusting dials and peering at readouts. "This is unprecedented," she muttered. "The electromagnetic fluctuations are off the charts." I approached the mirror cautiously, my heart pounding. The surface seemed to shimmer and shift, like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. And then, slowly, a face began to form in the glass. My face, but not my face. "Evelyn," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Do you see that?" She turned, her eyes widening as she saw what I saw. "My God," she breathed. "It's just like you described." The face in the mirror smiled, a cold, cruel expression that sent chills down my spine. And then it spoke, its voice a twisted echo of my own. "William," it purred, "so good of you to bring a friend. We've been waiting for you." Evelyn gasped, stumbling backward. "This is impossible," she muttered. "It can't be real." But it was real. All too real. The face in the mirror laughed, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Oh, but it is real, dear Evelyn. More real than you can imagine. And now, thanks to William here, we're finally ready to step through." A hand, my hand, but elongated and distorted, began to push through the surface of the mirror, reaching out towards us. I grabbed Evelyn's arm, pulling her towards the door. "We need to get out of here. Now!" We ran from the room, slamming the door behind us, but even through the thick wood we could hear laughter, my laughter, but twisted and wrong. Panting, we leaned against the wall in the corridor. What was that?" Evelyn gasped, her face pale. I shook my head, my mind reeling. "I don't know, but I think I might have made a terrible mistake." Evelyn's expression hardened. "We need to destroy that mirror, Will. Whatever's in there, whatever it wants, it can't be allowed to get out." I nodded, but a part of me hesitated. Destroy the mirror? Could I really do that? It was a priceless artifact, possibly the key to understanding forces beyond our comprehension. And yet, the memory of that twisted version of myself reaching out towards us. "You're right," I said finally. "But how? We can't just smash it. What if that releases whatever's inside?" Evelyn thought for a moment. "We need to research. Find out how Lady Isabella contained it in the first place. There must be a way to seal it permanently." As we talked, formulating a plan, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every shadow seemed to hide malevolent eyes, every reflection a potential gateway for the thing in the mirror. We agreed to meet again the next day, after Evelyn had a chance to consult some of her colleagues, and I could do more digging in the castle's archives. As she left, Evelyn placed a hand on my arm. "Be careful, Will. Don't go near that mirror alone. Promise me." I nodded, but even as I did, I felt a pull, an almost irresistible urge to return to room 3, to look into the mirror one more time. That night, as I tossed and turned in my bed, unable to sleep, I heard a whisper. My own voice, but not my voice, calling to me from the darkness. "William," it said, "come back to us. See what you could become. All you have to do is step through." I pressed my pillow over my ears, trying to block out the seductive whisper, but deep down, I knew it was futile. The mirror had shown me a glimpse of something beyond this world, and part of me, a part I was becoming increasingly afraid of, wanted to see more. As dawn broke, I made a decision. I would go back to the castle early before Evelyn arrived. I told myself it was to do more research to find a way to end this. But in my heart, I knew the truth. The mirror was calling, and I had to answer. The castle loomed before me, a dark silhouette against the pale morning sky. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding in my chest. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to drive away and never look back. But the pull of the mirror was stronger than my fear. I made my way through the silent halls, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The castle felt different in the early morning light, older, more sinister, as if it knew what I was about to do and disapproved. Standing before the door to room 3, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay beyond. I pushed it open, wincing at the creak of rusted hinges. The mirror stood exactly where I'd left it, innocuous in the dim light. But as I approached, I could feel its power, like static electricity raising the hair on my arms. "Hello?" I called out, feeling foolish even as I did so. Is Is anyone there? For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a face began to form in the glass. My face, but not my face. It smiled, a cold, cruel expression that sent shivers down my spine. "William," it purred, its voice a twisted echo of my own. "We've been waiting for you." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stand my ground. "What are you? What do you want from me?" The thing in the mirror laughed, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We are you, William, or rather what you could be. All your potential, all your darkest desires, freed from the constraints of morality and physics." I shook my head, trying to clear it of the fog that seemed to be settling over my thoughts. "That's impossible. You're some kind of entity, using my appearance to trick me." "Oh, William," it sighed, almost fondly. "Always so rational, so skeptical. It's what drew us to you in the first place, but surely by now you've realized that there are things in this world beyond your understanding." As it spoke, the surface of the mirror began to ripple and shift. I saw flashes of other places, other times. Myself, but not myself, wielding powers beyond imagination. Ruling empires, bending reality to my will. "This could all be yours," the thing whispered. "All you have to do is step through, join us, and together we'll reshape the world." I found myself leaning closer, my hand reaching out towards the glass. It would be so easy, just one step. A loud bang from behind me shattered the moment. I spun around to see Evelyn standing in the doorway, her face pale with shock and fear. "Will," she cried, "get away from there." The thing in the mirror snarled, its face contorting into something inhuman. "You're too late," it hissed. "He's ours now." Evelyn rushed forward, grabbing my arm and pulling me back. The moment her hand touched me, it was like a spell being broken. I stumbled away from the mirror, gasping as if I'd been underwater. "We need to get out of here," Evelyn said urgently, tugging me towards the door. "Now, Will!" As we fled the room, I could hear the thing in the mirror howling with rage, the sound echoing through the castle like the wails of the damned. We didn't stop running until we reached the castle grounds, collapsing onto a bench, both of us panting heavily. What were you thinking?" Evelyn gasped, her eyes blazing with a mixture of fear and anger. "You promised me you wouldn't go near that thing alone." Shame washed over me. I don't know. It was calling to me, Ev. I couldn't resist." Evelyn's expression softened slightly. "Oh, Will, what are we going to do?" Before I could respond, a voice called out from across the grounds. "Mr. Thorne? Dr. Chen, is everything all right?" We looked up to see Dr. Blackwood approaching, her brow furrowed with concern. As she drew closer, her eyes narrowed, taking in our disheveled appearance and panicked expressions. "What's happened?" she asked sharply. I opened my mouth, ready to spill everything, but Evelyn spoke first. "Dr. Blackwood, we've encountered something unusual in the North Wing. Something potentially dangerous. We believe it may be related to the mirror associated with Lady Isabella." Dr. Blackwood's face went pale. "You've seen it then? The entity in the mirror?" I stared at her in shock. You knew about it?" She sighed heavily, suddenly looking much older. "I had my suspicions. The Blackwood family has been guarding that mirror for generations, passing down warnings and half-remembered tales. But in recent years, it's been dormant. I had hoped." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Come with me. There's something you need to see." Dr. Blackwood led us to her office, a room I'd never been allowed to enter before. She unlocked a hidden panel in the wall, revealing a small safe. From it, she withdrew an ancient, leather-bound book. "This is the true history of Blackmoor Castle," she said solemnly. "Passed down through the family line, never shared with outsiders. Until now." She opened the book, revealing pages filled with cramped handwriting and strange diagrams. "The mirror is not just a mirror, It's a portal, a gateway to somewhere else, a place of immense power but also great danger. I leaned forward, my eyes scanning the pages hungrily. But what is the entity? Why does it look like me? Dr. Blackwood's expression was grim. It takes the form of whoever gazes into it, showing them a version of themselves unfettered by morality or natural law. It tempts them with power, with the fulfillment of their deepest desires. But it's a trap. Those who step through are consumed, their life force used to strengthen the entity and widen the portal. Evelyn gasped. So if it had succeeded in pulling Will through, the consequences would have been catastrophic, Dr. Blackwood finished. The barrier between our world and theirs would have been weakened, perhaps irreparably. I sat back, my mind reeling. So what do we do? How do we stop it? Dr. Blackwood turned a page in the book, revealing an intricate ritual diagram. There is a way to seal the portal permanently, but it's dangerous, and it requires a willing sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? I asked, a cold dread settling in my stomach. Dr. Blackwood met my eyes, her gaze steady and solemn. The mirror has formed a connection with you, William. To close the portal, someone must enter it voluntarily, with the intention of sealing it from the other side. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You mean... She nodded gravely. Yes, William. To save our world, you may have to sacrifice yourself to the world beyond the mirror. The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. I looked from Dr. Blackwood to Evelyn, seeing the fear and concern in their eyes, and in that moment, I knew what I had to do. Tell me more about this ritual, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. If I'm going to do this, I need to know everything. As Blackwood began to explain. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping onto a path from which there would be no return. But if it meant protecting the world from the horrors I'd glimpsed in the mirror, it would be worth it. Wouldn't it? The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic preparation and grim determination. Dr. Blackwood's ancient tome contained detailed instructions for the sealing ritual, each step more daunting than the last. Evelyn and I pored over the text, committing every word to memory, knowing that a single misstep could spell disaster. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the castle grounds, we gathered the necessary materials. Candles made from black wax, herbs I'd never heard of, and a knife with a blade that seemed to drink in the light rather than reflect it. The gravity of what we were about to attempt hung heavy in the air. Will, Evelyn said softly, catching my arm as we were about to enter the north wing. Are you sure about this? There has to be another way. I met her gaze, seeing the fear and concern in her eyes. For a moment, I wavered. The thought of stepping through that mirror, of sacrificing myself to an unknown fate, was terrifying. But then I remembered the malevolent entity's promise of power, the seductive pull I'd felt. If I didn't do this, how long before someone else fell victim to its temptations? I have to do this, Ev, I said, squeezing her hand. We can't risk that thing getting loose in our world. She nodded, blinking back tears. I know. I wish it didn't have to be you. Dr. Blackwood approached, her face grave. It's time, she said. Remember, William, once the ritual begins, you must not falter. The entity will try to stop you, to tempt you. You must resist, no matter what it shows you or offers you. I swallowed hard, nodding. I understand. We entered room 3, the mirror looming before us like a dark promise. As we began to set up for the ritual, arranging candles and drawing intricate symbols on the floor, I could feel the entity's presence growing stronger. The surface of the mirror rippled and swirled, faces and scenes flashing across its surface too quickly to comprehend. William, it called, its voice a twisted version of my own. Why do you resist us? Think of all we could accomplish together, the power you could wield, the knowledge you could gain. I gritted my teeth, focusing on the task at hand. You can't tempt me, I growled. I know what you really are. The entity laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. Do you? You've barely scratched the surface, little scholar. There are wonders beyond your imagination on this side of the glass. Step through, and all will be revealed. As it spoke, the mirror's surface cleared, showing me visions of myself. In one, I stood before a rapt audience, unveiling groundbreaking discoveries that rewrote the laws of physics. In another, I wielded power that bordered on godlike reshaping reality with a thought. I faltered, the knife slipping in my grasp. It would be so easy to give in, to step through and claim that power. Will! Evelyn's voice cut through the haze of temptation. Don't listen to it. Remember why we're here. Her words snapped me back to reality. I shook my head, clearing it of the entity's seductive whispers. Nice try, I snarled at the mirror, but I'm not falling for your tricks. The entity's expression twisted with rage. The room began to shake, books and artifacts toppling from shelves. You fool! It howled. You would throw away ultimate power for these insignificant lives? We will destroy everything you love. The mirror's surface boiled and churned, horrific visions flashing across it. I saw Evelyn and Dr. Blackwood writhing in agony, the castle crumbling to dust, the world consumed by chaos and darkness. It's an illusion, Will, Dr. Blackwood shouted over the cacophony. Stay focused on the ritual. With trembling hands, I continued the preparations, forcing myself to ignore the nightmarish scenes playing out in the mirror. As I worked, I began to chant the words Dr. Blackwood had taught me, ancient syllables that felt heavy and strange on my tongue. The air in the room grew thick and heavy, charged with an energy that made my skin prickle. The candles flared, their flames stretching towards the ceiling. In the mirror, the entity's faces, my faces, multiplied, screaming in fury and fear. Now, William! Dr. Blackwood cried. It's time! I stepped forward, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. The surface of the mirror rippled like water, reaching out towards me with spectral tendrils. Wait! Evelyn's voice rang out. I turned to see her, tears streaming down her face. Will, I love you. I should have told you before. Please don't do this. We'll find another way. For a moment I hesitated. The thought of leaving Evelyn, of never seeing her again, was almost unbearable. But as I looked into her eyes, I saw something off. A glint of triumph, quickly hidden. You're not Evelyn, I said, my voice shaking. This is another trick. The false Evelyn's face contorted with rage, melting away to reveal the entity's true form, a writhing mass of shadows and malevolent intent. Clever boy, it hissed. But not clever enough. Shadowy tendrils shot out from the mirror, wrapping around my arms and legs. I cried out in pain as they began to pull me towards the glass. But this wasn't how it was supposed to happen. I was meant to step through willingly, not be dragged in by force. Will! The real Evelyn's voice cut through my panic. The knife! Use the knife! With the last of my strength, I raised the ritual blade. Its dark metal gleamed in the candlelight as I plunged it into the nearest tendril. The entity screamed, a sound of pure agony that shook the very foundations of the castle. The tendrils loosened, and I stumbled backward, gasping for breath. But I knew this was my only chance. Before the entity could recover, I lunged forward, knife outstretched, and threw myself into the mirror. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of fractured realities. I saw countless versions of myself, of the castle, of history unfolding in infinite variations. The entity's screams echoed from every direction, and I felt its essence trying to latch onto me, to consume me. But I held on to my purpose, my sense of self. With every ounce of will I possessed, I began the final words of the sealing ritual. As I spoke, I felt reality solidifying around me, the swirling chaos coalescing into a singular, terrible truth. I had made it through the mirror, but what awaited me on the other side was beyond anything I could have imagined. And as the portal began to close behind me, sealing me in this realm of nightmares and wonders, I realized that my journey and my true test was only just beginning. The world beyond the mirror was a nightmare made manifest. Reality twisted and warped around me, defying all logic and natural law. Fragments of landscapes collided and merged. Gothic castles floated in starry voids. Forests of crystalline trees sprouted from seas of liquid darkness. And everywhere, reflections of myself watched with hungry alien eyes. I stumbled forward, my mind reeling as it tried to make sense of the impossible geometries surrounding me. The ritual knife clutched in my hand seemed to pulse with an inner light, the only familiar thing in this realm of chaos. "Welcome, William," a chorus of voices echoed from every direction. My voices, but distorted, overlapping in a cacophony that threatened to shatter my sanity. "Welcome to the truth of existence." I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to focus on my purpose. "I'm here to seal the portal," I shouted into the void. "To stop you from invading our world." Laughter rippled through the air, as tangible as a physical force. "Oh, William, still clinging to your limited perception of reality. Don't you see? We are not invading your world. We are liberating it." The landscape shifted, and suddenly I was standing in a perfect replica of Room 3 back in Blackmoor Castle. But this version was wrong, the colors too vivid, the angles subtly skewed. And instead of one mirror, the walls were covered in countless reflective surfaces, each showing a different scene. "Look," the entity commanded, its voice now coming from my own reflection. "See the infinite possibilities that exist beyond the constraints of your paltry dimension." Despite myself, I looked. In one mirror, I saw myself as a renowned scientist, unveiling discoveries that revolutionized our understanding of the universe. In another, I was a powerful sorcerer, bending reality to my will. Mirror after mirror showed versions of myself that had achieved greatness beyond my wildest dreams. "This could all be yours," the entity purred. "Why settle for one limited existence when you could experience them all? Why sacrifice yourself for a world of boundaries and limitations?" I felt my resolve wavering. The sealing ritual seemed distant, unimportant in the face of such infinite potential. Maybe the entity was right. Maybe this wasn't an invasion, but an evolution. "Will!" A familiar voice cut through my thoughts. I spun around to see Evelyn's face in one of the mirrors, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "Don't listen to it. Remember who you are, why you're here." "Evelyn?" I whispered, reaching out to touch the glass. The entity snarled, the room warping around us. "She is nothing, a fleeting spark in the vastness of existence. We offer you eternity." But Evelyn's appearance had broken the entity's spell. I remembered the feel of her hand in mine, the warmth in her eyes when she looked at me. I remembered Dr. Blackwood's trust, the weight of responsibility she had placed on my shoulders. I remembered who I was, not the godlike beings in the mirrors, but William Thorne, a man willing to sacrifice everything to protect those he loved. "No," I said, my voice growing stronger. "I don't want your eternity. I choose my world, with all its limitations and mysteries. I choose to be human." The entity howled in rage, the room shattering like glass around us. I found myself falling through a kaleidoscope of realities, each one offering a glimpse of what might have been. But I stayed focused, clutching the ritual knife and reciting the words of the sealing spell. As I spoke, I felt something fundamental shifting in the fabric of reality. The chaos around me began to coalesce, forming into a singular point of blinding light. The entity's screams reached a fever pitch, a sound of fury and desperation that threatened to tear me apart. "You cannot do this!" it shrieked. "You are part of us now. If you seal the portal, you'll be trapped here forever." I faltered for a moment, the full weight of my decision crashing down on me. To be trapped in this realm of madness for eternity. Could I really condemn myself to such a fate? But then I thought of Evelyn, of Dr. Blackwood, of all the people in my world who would be safe if I succeeded. I thought of the castle, of the simple beauty of a sunrise over the moors, and I knew that no matter the cost, this was the right choice. "So be it," I said, and spoke the final words of the ritual. The world exploded into light and sound. I felt myself being torn apart and remade, my very essence scattered across the infinite realities of the mirror realm. For a timeless moment, I was everything and nothing, everywhere and nowhere. And then suddenly it was over. I found myself standing in a vast, empty space. The chaos was gone, replaced by a serene stillness. Before me floated a single mirror, its surface dark and lifeless. "It's done," I whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "The portal is sealed." As if in response to my words, cracks began to spread across the mirror's surface. I watched in awe as it shattered, the pieces dissolving into motes of light that swirled around me. "Thank you, William Thorne," a voice spoke, not with sound, but directly into my mind. It was not the entity's voice, but something older, faster. "You have restored the balance that was lost so long ago." What are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We are the true guardians of this realm," the voice replied. "The entity you fought was a corruption, a parasite that sought to devour all realities. You have freed us, and in doing so, saved countless worlds." Relief washed over me, followed quickly by a pang of sorrow. "But I'm trapped here now, aren't I? I can never go home." The light swirled faster, taking on a comforting warmth. "Your sacrifice will not be forgotten, William Thorne. You have earned your rest and your reward." Before I could ask what that meant, the lights engulfed me. I felt myself dissolving, my consciousness expanding to encompass the vastness of the mirror realm. In that moment, I understood everything. The true nature of reality, the interconnectedness of all things, the beauty and terror of existence. And then I was falling, tumbling through layers of reality towards a familiar point of light. I gasped, my eyes flying open. I was lying on the floor of room 3 in Blackmoor Castle, the shattered remains of the mirror scattered around me. Evelyn and Dr. Blackwood knelt beside me, their faces etched with worry and relief. "Will!" Evelyn cried, pulling me into a fierce embrace. "You're back! We thought we'd lost you!" As I hugged her back, savoring the solid reality of her presence, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in one of the mirror shards. For just a moment, I saw not just myself, but countless versions of William Thorne, each one smiling with the wisdom of worlds. I had journeyed beyond the looking glass and returned, forever changed but still fundamentally myself. And as I held Evelyn close, breathing in the musty air of the castle that had never seemed so sweet, I knew that the greatest adventure, life itself, was only just beginning.